we found it on Facebook, and there was concern about your stand on guns. So the vetting form, the let's see, sorry, I was so intent on your answer, I didn't prep for the next question. Okay, so, no, that's a big stick. I do remember some of it was that you tend to, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed upon, quite literally. And so with, that's one part of the Second Amendment. It also talks about a well-regulated militia. So is there any, how do they temper, those statements temper each other? How do you resolve those?
Well, the contextually, yeah, first of all, pretty literal. And a lot of this comes from striving to, being a far left candidate, especially, and wanting to reach right. I always been trying to figure out what's going on in the brains of these fellow citizens who think very differently. And time and time again, it comes back to these, kind of crazy conversations that nobody really wants to have in public, but everybody I've had it with are relatively serious about. And, the right to keep and bear arms was put in place basically because our asses were saved by the regular people defending themselves. That's how this country was formed. Conversation of representation, if all that was the same conversation. Look, might makes right in our world. The big, strong, and powerful are what are going to make the decisions. And so a quote unquote well-regulated militia and the right to keep and bear arms was a right provided to us, kind of like the right to peaceably assemble, to defend our own sovereignty. And so when they said not be infringed upon, and when I speak to people on the right about this issue, they're talking about how, for example, common sense gun control does infringe upon their rights. It kind of moves the bar inwards, and there's a lot of fear on the right about that because give an inch, take a mile is what happens, and said to happen, and does happen. And, you look at our rights slowly eroding away at every stage. Look at how our rights are being taken away on the issue of peaceable protest, for example. And so the Constitution was written with that in mind, knowing that it would go the way it went. Very wise and fallible humans got together to write this document, and they knew exactly how it was going to go. Time and time again, the more history I study, I'm like, wow, they knew exactly where we were going, and they put the antidote in the texts, knowing that we would need to, at some point, to rise up and figure it out and fix it after it got broken. And so the shall not be infringed upon, I choose literal, basically to open a dialogue with the right and in understanding. I'm not going on there, and I don't intend to go there, unless literally aliens invade, unless we're literally dealing with that, like that's at that point, yes, I'm down and I'm going and I'm all in. But in the meantime, very much pacifist and would, sooner turn the other cheek than draw on fire. But I get the right, and I respect the right, and I want them to have that right, regardless of how irrational the fear may be. And the more I think about these quote unquote irrational fears, the more I'm like, well, yeah, that's actually plausible. And it was plausible in the 1700s. And, look at what happened, right? The White House was burned down, and it did stop us from actualizing our Constitution, resulting in lacking democracy. That both sides of that amendment, a well-regulated militia and the right to keep and bear arms, could have stopped that if we had a better regulated militia at that time. Well, what about right now? So if you want to, I don't think they balance each other out so much. What is a well-regulated militia implies that we, the people, would be more organized and cooperating better, and we would know who was armed around us, and we would have strategies in place for if something were to go down, how we would deal with that. I like that idea. I don't know that I'm going to put my energy there, but I think that's an appropriate. I think that the right should be looking at that side of the amendment and be more transparent, um, and I think that the left should be taking the right seriously on this. I think that we on the left really need to be talking to these, instead of referring to them as wingnuts, as they refer to us as whatever libtards or whatever. Talking about, what about the need for a well-regulated militia? I mean, I think that's within reason. These are intelligent humans who are making a point that we really should listen to. Does that answer your question, Courtney?
Yes. And then the other aspect of the question that came up was, uh, with all the gun violence in America, uh, how do we address that if it's not through gun control? Do you see it as there are countries that have as high a ratio of guns to people that don't have the violence
Right.
that we do? So what then?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a perfect example that, in my book, the gun control laws are a band-aid on a gangrenous, festering wound that does actually make it a little bit better. It's more like a band-aid with Vicodin and morphine in it, and it slaps it on there. It makes it a little better. It does make it better. The numbers go down. But at the same time, you erode the rights. You take the guns out of the law-abiding citizens' hands, and leave them in the hands of people who are not going to use them. So all kinds of other problems like that. And so if you look at the other countries that have these numbers about, who does have guns, but they have less violence than us, you look below the surface and you'll see that they have other things in place that are not causing problems. I mean, for example, if our our young parents in the lower class weren't struggling to make ends meet and oftentimes giving up, and if our fathers, our quote unquote deadbeat dads, weren't driven away by the impossibility of the situation, maybe you don't have some of these problems of youngsters growing up without role models, and their only role model is Master Chief and a battle rifle. Like that is happening in our world, where our kids are growing up with more guidance from Halo 3 than from their own fathers. And that's a systemic problem that is way, 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 way deeper than guns. So my solution to that is to look at these other things that we talked about. What about a universal basic income? What about giving fathers the right to stay with their children, when they want to? I mean, why not solve the problem that way? Because that will solve the problem. A lot of those kids, all they really needed was to be spanked at the right time, in my humble opinion. Forgive me for saying that out loud as a candidate, and I know I'll get my ass kicked for that later. But the cold hard truth is that we are warriors. I was born a warrior and will always be that. And the only thing that changes me from that crazy kid that bombed the high school was that I had good role models, and I was able to make mistakes, and I had somebody correct me. So don't look at it like, Ty is against gun control. Not that I'm against control. I just don't think it's the problem. That's not the issue. We're not addressing the issue when we talk about gun control. Got to go way, way, way deeper.
So you propose that by making sure people don't feel economic crisis, that we might be able to reduce gun violence?
Yeah, and in a nutshell, yeah. I mean, it's not. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And the answer is, yes, I do believe that is a better way to solve it than gun control.
Okay. Well, thank you. We've covered the planned questions.